Hi. So let's explore using unit cost analysis for dealing with a crop failure and how that might impact your farm's income for the year. Say you've had disease or deer wipe out part of a crop. What can you do or need to do? Can you absorb the loss or can you make some changes right away? Well, you can use a unit cost analysis to help understand the impact. And here's an example of a unit cost analysis from Charade's Farm, a large scale veggie farm that specializes in just a few crops, including carrots, that they mostly sell wholesale. And this crop costing tool is one that I got from Kitchen Table Consultants, a farm financial consulting business which is now known as Good Roots. But I like this template as it looks more like a survey than a spreadsheet. You simply go down through the form, filling in the orange cells. So we see Charade's farm grows carrots in 300-foot beds, 2 rows per bed, and they expect a yield of 500 pounds per bed and an average price of 220 a pound. So they're going to get $1,100 per bed. Then, in this template, you're asked to estimate how much of the gross margin on this crop you want to cover your farm's overhead costs. That is, what you want from the crop to cover fixed expenses like insurance, utilities, loan servicing. And they recommend 20% for wholesale crops or 40% for retail crops. Now, for Charade's farms here, carrots are one of four major crops, so they put in 25%, looking to have carrots cover 1/4 of their farm's fixed costs this year. Now, going down further, you see all the gray areas in this form are locked. They get filled in automatically with the formulas after you enter data in the orange cells. So, next we see Charade's farm grows 40 beds of carrots, and that means their projected revenues are $44,000. And then come the expenses, and we see they put in labor at $18 an hour plus taxes and benefits, and then variable costs, which include seeds, soil amendments, packaging, supplies. And then finally, down at the bottom, the biggest section shows the costs of labor per bed. Here, all the rows for every step along the way of growing, harvesting, packing the crop. And then that's calculated by the number of passes and then the number of minutes per pass. And all these numbers are turned into the total hours per bed, which for Charade's farm is 26.5. Finally, we get down to the analysis at the bottom, and we see that for their 40 beds, the total sales, the direct operating costs and labor, and all of that leaves them with a $12,200 profit. That's their revenues over costs for the carrots. And this is a 28% gross margin, which is great. It's even more than their projected goal of 25%. And then in the final cell outlined in pink, we see their cost of production as $1.59 per pound. That is their unit cost. So that's a situation that Charade's farm is looking at for a normal year. But now, let's throw in a wrench. Let's say a windstorm blew down a big tree at the back of the field, which pulled down a section of their deer fence. And so deer found their way in and ate and pulled up some big sections of the beds. Overnight, about 20% of their carrot crop was destroyed, lost. So the first thing to do after repairing the fence is to jump into this crop costing tool and see what the impacts are going to be. And I'm going to do this live. It's pretty easy to do. And I'm going to start right here with the yield. 20% loss, that means that instead of getting 500 pounds per bed, they now can expect to only get 400 pounds. And that's all I have to do. This is all theoretical here in this make believe spreadsheet world. But so, what does that mean in the real world? Well, we see that their cost of production went from 159 up to 198 per pound. And that dropped their gross margin down to 10%. And they're only making about $3,400 on their $32,000 investment. They're not happy with this scenario and they wonder what they can do about it. Well, with this tool, we can change one part of the story and then other parts of the story as well. Let's start by seeing what happens if they can adjust their pricing. Now, how much a wholesale farm can renegotiate or raise prices, I don't know. Let's say they can ask for $2.45 a pound. That's an 11% increase in the price. If they have that much wiggle room, we can see, well, they're still not hitting their margin, but getting closer to it, almost 20% margin. And that's what this form recommends for wholesaling, but they're only making about $7,500. Well, because this is make-believe world, which we can modify to give us insights that we can use in reality, let's say, what the heck, if they can raise the price, to whatever they want. Let's say since they had a 20% crop loss, they raise their prices 20%. And that would be 264 a pound. And here, let's see. Oh my goodness. Well, that's what it would take to reach their 25% margin goal. But note that the profit is 10,500 instead of the 12,200 originally, since they lost some of their profit in the deer damage with their price going up to $1.98 per pound. Well, I'm doubtful that Charade's farm can raise their pricing as much as that. So let's explore one more option. Let's say that the deer got in just at the far edges of the field, and the primary damage was only in 10 beds. And if there were 30 beds that were pretty much untouched, we can create a scenario where they still realize a close to normal harvest from 30 out of the 40 beds, and they plow in the 10 heavily damaged beds. So back here in the top section, we say there are now 30 beds, which we'll expect, instead of the original 500 pounds, let's say 480 pounds per bed. And we go back to the original $2.20 per pound. Down to the analysis, and we see, aha, that's what they can expect to hit their original margin goal with, right at 25%. Although the gross revenue is only about 8,000 instead of the original 12,200, maybe they can live with this, but maybe they can't. It gives them a likely scenario to consider. They can see what the impact is, what they can do about it, and say that the deer cost them about $4,200 in their gross margin. Of course, there are other ways to play around with the options, like maybe they could raise their prices 3% instead of 11%, or try to save a little on those labor costs, like putting their best workers on the harvest and wash packing. The point I want to make with all this is not whether you agree with these numbers and decisions, but that you see the spreadsheet as a living landscape. It's a place to cultivate and move numbers around until you like the picture you're seeing. Options can be played out here in the fictional world so that you can bring informed decisions to your real life buyers and customers and farm workers with the goal of maintaining a level of sustainability that you're comfortable with. So thanks for watching. This video is one in a series of farm financial topics that cover the chart of accounts, as well as cash flow projections and unit cost analysis spreadsheets. I hope you'll look those up. Check the links below for more information.